This is Michael Hathorn. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for CNU Utah. We have a fantastic opportunity this afternoon to have Daniel Hintz from the Velocity Group to speak to us on the subject matter of unifying the art and economics of great places. This is an opportunity for us to learn from Daniel and the work that he has done relative to basically being the facilitator of creating the activity that really gives life to place. I think all of us understand that place requires people and buildings, but it's the activity that really gives life to it. And Daniel's work has really been instrumental in helping to identify this as a bit of a science, and we're extremely pleased to have him with us to be able to share from his experience and the projects that he's worked on, where he's actually taken the theoretical and created reality. So with that, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll redefine some reality through this piece. I just want to say thank you for the invitation to hang out with you guys. I'm at a slight disadvantage because I don't know how many people are out there, what you look like, or whether you're about ready to throw tomatoes or not. But you can throw them at each other, and then I'll just live vicariously through each of you. Thank you so much, Mike, for the invitation. So just really quickly, we're kind of hoping that your tray tables are in that upright lock position and your seats are up and your phones are in airplane mode, because I kind of designed the presentation to be a journey. And so if you want to just write your questions down or hold off to the end, because the next slide may respond to some of those things. So as Mike said, we're talking today about the unification of the art form of great places, of the economics of great places. And we're speaking from a very high level because we can easily go down the rabbit hole of detail. So just to kind of jump out, I wanted to start with sort of my personal relationship with that concept of place and where I sit. You know, place is a very personal journey. We can speak about it as a physical thing, but I approach it as a very personal journey. It really is sort of a mix of memory, of time, of mass, and all of those things sort of merge into what people talk about place. It transcends the physical, and I think that's another key piece to much of what I'm going to talk about today, is that it isn't just about the physical realm. Oftentimes when people talk about place, they talk about buildings or architecture, or streetscape, those very physical, tangible things. But I want to make it very clear that when I speak about place, it is transcendent of that physical, and it really is in the realm of the experience. And so experience matters, and how we bring experience together is really the value of that place. But it does have very tangible, on-the-ground components to it as well. So it's not all just philosophical. It's kind of speaking to the shift in consumer demands and its relationship to place. You know, really between about 1946, as everyone was coming back from World War II in through the 1970s, we really had sort of a mass market of the American consumer that kind of sat in that middle place. You know, the rise of the suburbs, the rise of the sort of car culture. And on the wings of that consumer, we had inexpensive, cheap product coming predominantly from Japan and Asia. People were obviously buying it, but they weren't talking about it. They weren't sharing it. It wasn't really something that folks are proud of. And if you can get on the back end, when you start talking about, you know, the great iconic brands of America, you know, if you could buy an Oldsmobile, if you could buy those types of things that were a status symbol, that were unique, that was a big deal, and you talked about it. And that became kind of the brand of America. But really, when we started talking about a major shift between the 1970s and the 1980s. We started seeing the emergence of a new customer value curve. And really, we have two different types of valuation when it comes to place now. We have commodity, which is your big boxes, which is your 4,000 unit apartments and properties. And really what you're talking about there is that you're competing via price. And the only way that you can compete in that realm is absolute volume. And the way you do volume is everything is the same, right? And that's how you can compete in that world. And it has a place in certain economies. Here in Arkansas, we rely on sales tax. And so some of that big box and some of those big sales are vitally important to some of the financial parts of the city. But small businesses and certain parts of the community just simply can't compete with that level of buying power. And so really, we have another section of the economy that is all based on experience. And that experience is very unique, very customized. It is those types of things that when you go to communities and you go into their downtowns predominantly, it's those places that feel good. And really what we have now is an economy that is either a commodity and driven by that big and the same, or the experience that is highly customizable, highly unique, and therefore you have a premium value. But you also know that there are parts of the community that has neither. They don't know what it is. It's an odd mix of this and that. And you sort of, that mass market has sort of shifted into a mediocre middle that really has no place and no concept. So if we were to put that into a place idea, the decision on what kind of community, what kind of neighborhood, or what kind of products you want to bring to the table is really, do you want to be everywhere, which is certainly a viable business model. It's very commodity driven, it's very ubiquitous, but it's also very fragile because it's very much reliant upon supply chains and other things that are not in your control. We often talk about someone stubs their toe in China and somehow New Jersey has a hiccup in its economy, and this is part of that everywhere economy. Versus that somewhere, which is very experience driven. It is very of the place. It drives your community brand. It's incredibly unique. And because of that, it's very hyper-localized, which means that it's very flexible and resilient. And then you see on the bottom of that value chain, that nowhere. It has no identity. You already know it's losing value, and it's already broken. So really the thing that the first challenge that I'll throw out to everyone is what kind of product, what kind of project, and what kind of community are you really driving? Is it an everywhere? Is it a somewhere? Is it a mix of everywhere and somewhere? Or is it the nowhere? And I know that communities have oftentimes a mixture of all of the above. So the next thing is really talking about the shift in our economic development models, because oftentimes when we're talking to government officials, we're talking to chambers of commerce, they speak in an economic development model, and we talk about developing communities in that model. So the old model was very much about job creation. People went to where they had jobs. The challenge with that is that it's very site-specific. So the rest of your community could be going to hell in a handbasket, but you have a really dynamic industrial park, right? And it's very much about the production of goods. Once again, that's very, very fragile because dependent upon what's going on in the global economy, you move back and forth with layoffs and hires and layoffs and hires, and it's a very volatile way of doing economic development. The new economic development model is about talent attraction. It's about trying to find people with that entrepreneurial spirit, the ability to be resilient no matter what happens in the economy. And really, the interesting thing about this is it is all about place. You're tackling this from a community-wide strategy where economic development is about the entirety of your community instead of being specific parcel or a specific type of industry. And it really opens up the model for input and output of that economic development about ideas and opportunities. And that really is your most resilient and flexible, because no matter what happens in the world around you, you have people that are able to adapt and they're able to kind of structure what they're doing based on what's going on in the overall community. And so this was actually brought up. I just came, and Jim was there. Jim Kuman from the Incremental Development Alliance, who I know is on the call as well. We just finished doing a big placemaker summit and small developer boot camp here in Bentonville, Arkansas. And Mike Harvey, who's the CFO of the Northwest Arkansas Council, brought this model up. And I wanted to kind of bring this up because this is what he says from a corporation or a business when they look at a community, the decision tree that happens here. And under the old economic model, they'd often look at utilities, they'd look at transportation, they'd look at the labor, the environmental, some of that taxing. But the new economy is very much about that quality of life because folks understand that if they move their company to a particular community and that community is not happening, it's going to be really hard to retain the type of talent that they want. So for those of you in the audience who are either in economic development or in architecture or in engineering or developers themselves, the decisions you make are vitally important to the overall health and well-being of your general community, specifically when it talks about having tools to attract those type of businesses that folks want to work for. The other piece about this, which I think is really interesting, is back in 2014, the American Planning Association released a report called Investing in Place. And some of the findings, I think, were really interesting. And we talk a lot about millennials, and I'm just going to tell you as a Gen Xer, I need to throw in a little bit of jazz hands for the Gen X community as well. But when you look at 74% of millennials that believe in investing in schools, transportation choices, and walkable areas is a better way to grow the economy. And communities are now competing for those millennials. That kind of gives you a really good understanding of what they're looking for before they move somewhere. One of the overriding factors, choosing where to live, they also cited quality of life ahead of local economic health and job prospects. This says a couple different things, that if your economy is currently having a little bit of a hiccup, but you have some good quality of life features and opportunity for these millennials, these Gen Xers, and even baby boomers, to be able to make a difference, to be able to get involved, and to be able to create businesses on their own, that will actually have a profound and positive impact on that local economy. Suburbs, surprisingly enough, rated last by all groups on a place to live. And 44% of Gen X and baby boomers and 55% of millennials polled were going to move in the next 5 years. That's over 140 million people who have the potential to move to your community. And so the question is, where will they move? And place matters in that decision. So next, I'm going to jump into sort of my process and how I approach answering that question of how do you become competitive in where people are going to move. And I have three different sort of chapters in this story to talk quickly about what I call the DNA of place. It's again that basic mitochondria, that basic pieces of place. I talk about the theater of cool, which is my process of planning and activation. And then story swell, the basic elements of how you engage people in telling your story and how can you best effectively tell your story at the same time. So what is that DNA of place? And there are four realms to this: safety, selection, service, and surprise. And I'll really briefly go through these. Safety is certainly about the safety of walking down the street and not getting jacked in the middle of the night, right? Or having your house broken into. That is certainly a part of that safety matrix. But safety also includes the ability to explore who and what you are as a human being in the space around you in a safe and positive manner. Because if you're able to explore that and connect that personality, that journey, and that relationship to yourself in context to everything around you, you feel a sense of ownership of that place. And that's really, really important. The next one is selection. This has to do, obviously, with selection of housing, sweaters, how many hamburgers you can get, what type of restaurants, that type of thing. But it also very much includes the selection of your networks, your business networks, the selection of friends For those of you who may be single, your ability to connect with the other human that is single, to potentially not be single at some point. That certainly is a part of that selection piece. And so something else to consider in your community is how are you creating places that allow people to mix and mingle in a safe place where they can generate friends, they can celebrate those friendships. That is just as important as the physical side of this equation as well. The third part of all this is about service. That great quote from Kennedy is that don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I think that that's vitally important in the concept of place. When someone provides their time, spends their time to help others, is engaged with actively moving their community forward, once again, they have a profound sense of ownership. But at the same time, the community itself has a very real obligation to serve the needs of that individual from both for-profit side as well as a nonprofit side. And that is very much determined individually by each city. So there isn't one particular answer, but service is a two-way street and a vital component to the DNA of place. And the fourth one is quite frankly one of my favorites. It's that idea of play and surprise. Even people that have lived in a community for 30 or 40 years, that opportunity to come around a corner that you've been coming around a corner with for that many years and finding something new, right? Now, surprise can also be a two-way street where you go to the same restaurant you've been going to and they've taken that sandwich off the menu that you love so well. So there are tactics around how you integrate and how you bring surprise and play. You just don't jump out of an alleyway in a giant hot dog costume and scare people. That's probably not the best way to surprise. But surprise and play is another very important part of place, because that means that that place is constantly reinventing itself. It's figuring out its identity and how new people that come into that place can inform that identity, and that's how communities grow. So notice how I haven't even mentioned really anything about the physical side of things right now. And that's because place transcends physicality and is all about the experience, and that's what these four realms are really all about. So then let's talk about the theater of cool. Now we're getting into the sort of meat and potatoes of how you really start to generate, plan, and execute this concept of place. And once again, this is a very personal journey. So what you need to do is you need to set the stage, you need to build the set, you need to place the props, and then invite and engage the actors and allow those actors to explore, the human beings to explore your stage, your set, and to work with the props to be able to create their own journey. It's about designing choice into your communities. It's be able to kind of set the tone and then step back and let the script sort of play itself out through the process. So we'll start first with designing the stage. So I'll give Northwest Arkansas, the Northwest Arkansas area sort of as the launching pad for this concept. And I think it's really important to know that this is a very asset-based approach to community design. When you look at it from a large community, we have a little over, probably about 530,000 people. That's very new. We're rapidly growing. Much of our population lives along the I-49 corridor. And that there has been a very clear and present strategy to ensure that the concept of place ties to the needs of our corporate community and our private citizens. And that is ongoing, as any good place-based economic strategy needs to be. So on the northern quarter, you have Bella Vista, all the way down to the southern part, which is in Fayetteville. Christa Bridges Museum of American Arts, which opened up on 11/11/11, was one of the most transformative pieces of sort of this big asset place-based effort in Northwest Arkansas. But we also have the University of Arkansas, which is a land-grant university in the late 1800s, kind of setting the pace for really a lot of the growth that you have. And then you have a lot of things in between. We have everything from the Walmart corporate headquarters to John Brown University, J.B. Hunt corporate headquarters. We have the Walton Art Center, which is a significant performing arts space in Fayetteville. And then we also have something called the Razorback Greenway, which is multiple miles of both hard track and soft track trails that connect all of our major cities. together and much of our downtowns. And so you have this large regional context to say, these are things that if you're a private developer or you're in a nonprofit and you're trying to figure out the best things to leverage, looking much further than your four walls or your immediate neighborhood is a great place to start. And figuring out how to capitalize on all the awesome things that are going on in a wide range throughout the region. So next, we start getting a little bit more focused in particular neighborhoods. Now, the Northwest Arkansas Council, who works regionally on economic development plans, as I mentioned, Mike Harvey had introduced that model in my earlier slide. They sort of challenged and put out a vision by saying that they wanted all the big 5 cities to have downtown master plans established by their community as part of sort of casting a bigger vision of how all these communities can lend to an overall regional identity. And as of December of last year, we were actually able to accomplish that. And so having that set of context, looking regionally, and then having a defined kind of playpen, if you will, or sandbox, is really, really important in this process of theater of pool, because you need to know what kind of stage you're playing with. And I use theater as a metaphor because I have a theater background, but at the same point, how you tell your story changes if it's theater in the round versus a proscenium stage, versus all kinds of different stages, or even street theater. And so just like that changes the way you tell the story, so does your overall acreage, your design, and your bigger piece of the master plan. And that's why it's really, really important. So really quickly, Bentonville, Arkansas, that downtown master plan is about 1,765 acres. There's a population of 45,000 people. This was done by the city of Bentonville. Rogers, Arkansas was done by Gateway Planning. That's about 427 acres, and that's just south of Bentonville going down the I-49 corridor. We have Springdale, Arkansas, which is the newest kid on the block when it comes to master planning. That's done by H3 Studio out of St. Louis. That's about 640 some acres. They have a population of 75,000. And then Fayetteville has about 360 acre master plan. That was done by Dover Coal, and they have a population of about 79,000. And then Siloam Springs was also done by Dover Coal and Associates. That's about 97 acres. So now we have context. We understand what's going on in the region. We have a good idea of what's happening in the core and the heart of these communities. So next, we start looking at the concept of experience districts, which is helping you drill down even further. Because when you're looking at 1,765 acres, there is no way to treat that entire district as the same thing. Or even at 97 acres, you can't. So it is really important to continue to drill down further and further, but to have alignment, sort of internal theming from your regional all the way down to that block, street, and building level. So what we noticed after Crystal Bridges opened on 11/11/11 is our downtown square was really humming. We were getting restaurants, we were getting foot traffic, but the southeast part of downtown was not advancing at the pace that I was the executive director of downtown Bentonville. I was running the nonprofit side of that downtown cultivation. And the city of Bentonville and downtown Bentonville kind of worked together on trying to figure out what are some ways that we can stimulate some new economic development in that southeast part of downtown. We had infrastructure issues. We had challenges with roads. There really wasn't a story down there for people to grasp onto. So we sort of taxed the vision of the market and the arts district, not so much from a prescriptive perspective, but really from a descriptive perspective to kind of set a tone and story. And these were passed in January of 2014. And for example, in the arts district, because of that sort of casting of the story, we've probably had about $30 million worth of new private development in that area, including multifamily, single family. We have some new public art going in the area. So the city has really been able to focus its attention in that arts district. The market district has also begun to take off. We have 27,000 square foot culinary school, Brightwater Culinary School, and then Crystal Bridges just announced a new project in there for a contemporary art museum in that market district. And this is where you start saying the experience districts are not hard and fast. This isn't a PR piece. When we first went into the market district, it was very much about food and food production. But the private market kind of came and stretched the vision of that. And now we're looking at the market identity around the concept of the marketplace of ideas and of concepts, and really sort of cultivating it that way. We took that example as well with the Gateway Plan with Downtown Rogers. We broke it up into 4 different realms, mainly because there are 4 distinct approaches that we needed to take in the downtown area, and really sort of set the tone that we looked at the overall master plan and we continued to break it down. For example, Frisco Front fronts a railroad, and that creates a very linear opportunity, but then you also have a major bike park, the rail yard bike park that's going in right there. And so we kind of played off those 2 areas, and there's an enormous amount of redevelopment that can happen along that railroad and tied to that bike park. That is speaking to both the railroad experience as well as to the bike experience. And this is sort of the front yard. Victory Row was built around the old Victory Theater, in which the Arkansas Public Theater sits in its home. And so how do you take that asset and help spill it into the street? What kind of businesses do you try to recruit to that Victory Row is a big piece as well. And it doesn't always have to be that formal. Did a project in Boerne, Texas, in which the experience districts were more of sort of an amorphous blobby type of thing. Kind of just threw some things out against the wall. Now, they were certainly informed by the streetscapes, certainly informed by the energy that was already pre-existing there. And so you kind of give it a name and a focus, and sort of you can continue to hone down. So you don't always have to be the municipality approaching it with an experience district. You can also be a private developer or a neighborhood group or a downtown association who can simply help cast a vision for what this area might be. And that way you're able to cultivate and potentially curate the things that go into that district over the long haul. So next, we start getting into that block, street, and building approach. And this is really where, once again, the Small Developer Alliance, and Jim being on the call, the Incremental Development Alliance, plays such a vital role, as do the rules behind your master plans. Because oftentimes you have a great vision, you have great principles, but once you get down to actually building these things, the rules and regulations don't match up with the vision. So this is where you really start getting the rubber hitting the road here with how you build your set. And this is the tough part, because now you're starting to not only look at how do you potentially rehab and reposition existing buildings, and sometimes you need an awful lot of imagination. But other times it's also about what is your streetscape? What is your street? What is your infrastructure? How can you handle new development? What does new development look like? What kind of new development do you want? And how do you set the rules and regulations to actually get the type of footprints that you need and want? And so making sure that the set is aligning with the type of stage that you're placing is really, really important. So when you're designing a street, when you're curating a story, something to think about, and this is just sort of, once again, a high-level model, as you look at the streetscape right through here, and the way that you think about it, are where are people entering into the street? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? And I love Gustav Freytag's sort of the way that he describes and breaks out a story, because quite frankly, as you develop, you are telling a story of your community. People can step into a community and see the types of buildings and how they're occupied and whether they want to participate in that story. And so you look at the exposition and you look at, well, how are you introducing the characters and the character of your streetscape? How do you get people to walk down the street? What sort of rising action? What compels them down the street? Are there certain types of public art? Are there certain things that you can place? Are your buildings have opaque windows in which there is no rising action? You've introduced characters and you can't even see into the buildings. Where do you get to that moment where you're like, I want something to happen? where's that one store, or where's that one thing that goes on, bringing them to that moment of heightened awareness, and then providing a resolution for them. And that's usually where they take out their wallet and purchase something or do something else. And you want to look at this as a constant wave of storytelling as people walk down the street. And that could be done initially through building your set. What kind of buildings and how do you infill? You've got a little alleyway right there. What can you do in that alleyway? You've got this piece right here. How are you creating opportunities on those corners there? This is a big old toothy thing here. What can you do in that space to help continue to move people down the street? Next, you're placing the props. These are the tools of the experience. And this is really the curatorial side of things. What kind of businesses and where they go, what kind of food, and getting down to the detail of the quality. You look at your coffee shops and your food and your bars and those other things that get people to move in and around your space, where you place bike racks, where you put public art. These are the types of things that can be used strategically to move people around downtown. And so it's the same situation that you have with curating a story. You have the corner right here and another corner right here. If you've got an office on that corner, taking up some big, beautiful windows, is that the best use of that type of building? Or is a coffee shop in which you have that sort of dynamics of what's going on? Because here's the other thing, is that space changes its meaning and its personality over time, over the course of a day. And I'll use the example of a coffee shop. People run in to grab a cup of coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're on to somewhere else, and they're using it just to kind of get in and get out. It's a tool. People come in and use coffee very differently from 9 to 11 o'clock, right? They're sitting around. They're having conversations. Coffee remains a tool, but it's much more of a conversational piece. Then you jump into lunch. Coffee takes sort of a back end to your other products and to your sandwiches. And then in the afternoon, it goes back to conversations. And then when you get into the evening, it takes a very different form. So that building and that corner can engage the same human being multiple times, depending on what you put in that corner and how you get people to move up and down the street. So this is an example of what we did in Rogers on the Frisco front, is we actually took empty buildings and said, this is something that could go here, that would get people to move up and down the street. So it was, you took the master plan and you really deep dive into that block street and building tenanting up. And that's how you connect it to economics. And this is very much based on economic studies of what the market could bear through this process. And there is a shopper science to this. As much as it makes my eye twitch to look at this type of development and go to a mall, what you do have is that you understand it's the same personality of businesses that sit around a Dillard's or a Sears as you go to mall after mall after mall after mall. This is intentional, and there is a science to this. And for those folks out there developing multiple sites, or for those downtown associations or property owner associations, to be able to look at that and use that as a model can sometimes help understand the psychology of the shopper and the persona of the shopper, and how you can curate your downtown or your development in a very clear and intentional way. And sometimes you're just swagging it on the back of a bar napkin, right? This is the other thing about this, is that it doesn't always have to be intentional. I mean, it doesn't have to always be municipally driven or big picture driven. Sometimes you can just sit down, sketch it out, and keep playing, right? You're moving chips around. You're trying to figure it out. Because that comes back to that surprise. If you're moving those pieces and puzzles around, that every time someone comes back to a district, you're really giving them something to say, oh, well, this is a new restaurant, or this is a new retail space, or these are new residential units on that. And the last really big piece of Theater of the Cool is engaging the actors, really bringing that stage to life, activating it through programming. And that programming can happen inside stores, can happen out on the public streets, right? And I think the big piece about it is, how do you bring people into this space? Because at this point, it's been very much about sort of the overall realm, but we hadn't really talked about the people yet. So all this is great, but if you're not getting people there, you're going to be real lonely, and that's kind of a creepy thing. It's like the Blair Witch Project. You're going to be sitting in a corner somewhere staring and feeling really uncomfortable. So getting people there are really, really important, and that can be done through a wide variety of ways. But some of those core elements of an experience, when you're engaging the actors, there's 4 big questions, I think, to ask yourself. Does the experience delight and entertain, whether it's in your business, in your building, or on the street? Does the experience transport to another place so they know that they're entering into someplace different? And does it allow respite? Because if you're constantly being bombarded with stimulus, it's really hard to absorb that. So you need to be able to design, whether it's a program, a public space, or even in a business, design an opportunity to sit and kind of take in the experience. It is really, really important because that's how they can ingest it. Does the experience pass along key knowledge and information? What do you want them to leave the space with? What kind of knowledge about that experience, about that business, and about that place? That's that memory and that nostalgia part. And does the experience indulge the senses and exceed expectations? Very much going back to that DNA of service. And the experience sweet spot, whether once again it is a program for 10, a program for 10,000, it's a building, it's a public street. The experience sweet spot involves all 4 of those realms. So those are some big questions to think about when you're designing your experience. But here's the other piece about the theater of cool, and this is vitally important to also understand, is that it takes a team. The production crew is made up of, really from a big picture standpoint, municipality, the private market, and civic organizations, and each one has a role, just like you have front of house and back of house. You have actors, you have lighting designers, you have directors in theater to create and stage a great theater piece. So the municipality really needs to set those clear baseline rules and guidelines and ensure that those barriers to investment are removed. And then they keep tweaking and really think about that long-range thinking. The civic organizations act as both curator of the district and the concierge of the private market opportunity. They sit in that gray area between what the municipality can accomplish because they're taxpayer-driven and what the private market can accomplish because their role is investing in and fueling the vision and developing relevant and quality projects. So to have a developer come in after the community has sort of set a vision and saying, this is what we want, and then they get upset when they go, well, I can't do this, which is in a complete difference from what the community has set with the vision. And by that also means your municipal codes, hopefully the municipality will have done their job to help set those guidelines. So it's really important to have sort of that what I call the catalytic triad, those 3 realms working together to move this theater of cool, to move this community forward. So the last real big piece is all about the story swell, right? How do you move between getting stuff done and telling the world about what's going on? Because that's the piece that really generates buzz. First and foremost, you want to share authentic stories. You want people to be sitting around the fireplace or whatever those guys in the picture are doing, sitting around talking about an experience. You know, the difference between sitting in Italy, right? Let's say you're in Florence on a corner drinking an espresso and the sun's going down and you hear Italian speaking and there's the noises and the smells. That cup of espresso will never taste as good as if you have it back in the United States in the place you already know. And so you'll talk about that with a sense of almost awe and fascination. You get this sort of heightened sense of awareness. How many times have people said, yeah, I got a Big Mac. And let me tell you about this Big Mac. It was the most incredible experience I ever had. And it's very different, right? It's a very different experience. So share your authentic stories and help other people share authentic stories. Look at your social media platforms, capture those stories and help them tell that to the world. Because people know when you're advertising to them. And so sharing those authentic stories are really important. Generate calls to action. just don't share stories, but inform people and challenge people to get involved, to create their own stories, to actively participate in the theater that is happening in front of them. Just don't be an audience member. Get involved. And therefore, you start to grow your storytellers. Cultivate and celebrate community champions. The guys in that picture are a whole bunch of chefs in downtown Bentonville, and we do a program to support the James Beard Foundation in New York. And so those chefs are the ones that are really helping to create the rock star status for our downtown Bentonville culinary scene. And so we need to cultivate and celebrate those folks, as well as other people, our artists, our small developers, those people that are doing right. And we need to celebrate them. And then the last piece is story swell. Just like anything else, if you're a business and you never stop thinking about what are you going to do next, what's the new product coming, if you're still just thinking that you can sell the same thing every day for year after year after year after year, you're not going to be successful and you'll eventually go out of business. Communities are the same way. So you need to constantly seed and produce new stories. If it's not happening, this is why I also look to theater. Sometimes you need to stage it. Sometimes you need to push it out there to push the vision. But you need to constantly be seeding and producing those new stories. And so this is a video that was done for Downtown Rogers. Video can also be an incredibly powerful medium. And so I want to play this really quickly to kind of show you sort of one of the tools that we used with Downtown Rogers. Hopefully you can hear. Sorry, there you go. Okay, so I heard that you guys couldn't hear the sound, and I apologize. I'll make sure you can actually go to is it Rogers? I'll find out because I think they took it down, but I'll make sure to find out where to send it, and you guys can take a look at the video. So the last piece, and I'll be able to take questions in just a second, but this is me in a hot dog outfit, mainly because the other thing I kind of want to leave you guys with is that you've got to get involved. You yourself have to get into the middle of the experience. It's the only way that you're able to test ideas in real time. You've got to be able to own that experience. You've got to be able to help people get involved. If you yourself are not out there championing this idea of place, championing what is going on, and people see you out there, it's going to ring hollow. So this is very much a part of the story swell is jumping in. And like I said, this is me in a hot dog outfit facilitating a hot dog eating contest that we did in downtown Bentonville during the first Friday events. We have 6,000 to 10,000 people show up. And if you've ever seen people shove 5 hot dogs under 3 minutes into their mouth, it's an experience, and it's quite gross. So with that being said, I am open to questions, and we'll go from there. So how do I hear questions? Mike?
Daniel, there's a few questions that I've texted over to you via the chat.
There we go.
Hopefully that can help kick things off.
Okay. So the first question I'll read is, can you further explain the importance of service in the DNA of place from the standpoint of its absence of a community if a community is poor in either its ability or willingness to serve? Start small. This is another reason why incremental development, whether it's a building, a person, or an economy, is vitally important. Go to a local church and see if you can find some volunteers. Go to a local business and see if you can find just one person to step up and to step out. And it's a great start. People follow other people, and service has little or nothing to do with money. It has to do with access, right? And the idea of providing access to people to serve their community, sometimes it's incredibly surprising who shows up. But as I mentioned, what are those places out there where people naturally gather? Churches, schools, those things, starting there. And if not, you get out there and start modeling the behavior you want to see in others and rolling from there. And it's an uphill battle sometimes. I've been there, served in communities challenged with economics, and you just got to get out there and keep grinding away. Did that answer that question?
Yes, thank you,
okay.
Daniel.
Great. How important is the relationship between people, buildings, and activities in connecting to human sense to enhance their experience? It's an ecosystem, right? The relationship has to be built and intentionally designed between people, places, and activities. Now, it is not a Disneyland, right? So you also have to know when to let go and know when you, as a private business owner, let's say you own a retail store and things are slow, one night you can do something in your store just to get people to come down, and then you start going to your neighbors. If you're a downtown association, the opportunity to do a small event, just simply shock the system sometimes into jump starting. But that relationship between people, buildings, and activities is the cornerstone of DNA of place, and is the cornerstone of the theater of cool. And so, yeah, that's the place you need to be sitting in and thinking about constantly, is what is the interactivity for all the various pieces in downtown. Next question, how do your principles translate to greenfield projects? Because much of my work is in pre-existing downtowns or pre-existing communities, and so it's a lot of infill. And so usually you have multiple property owners, multiple personalities, then you throw civic organizations, and then you throw the municipal side of it. And so that work can be incredibly complicated. And so it takes wrangling all those different personalities to move the needle. When you look at a greenfield project and you're in control of the entirety of this planning, I think it's vitally important to celebrate the fact that you often don't have to deal with the same fascinations of the human ego like you do in pre-built environments. But with the greenfield project, I think it's also very important to bake in a activation budget, just like you would with CAM space, common area maintenance space. within a greenfield, and the ability for folks to be able to have resources to begin activating early phase as you begin to onboard the greenfield. And I'm assuming the greenfield is mixed use, because the other piece that's really challenged is when you have a mono use, just residential. You start to challenge because your resources and your assets in engaging the human in that are limited. They don't go away, but they are limited. So I guess I ask the question, when you're saying greenfield project, are you assuming a more T&D, traditional neighborhood design, multi-use area, or are you speaking more towards a large sort of single-use type of development?
That's actually a good question, Daniel, and I think it's somewhat rhetorical to, I guess, ask back, because I think we all innately understand the answer to it. But you know, one of those two scenarios is going to be more challenging to your type of solutions than the other.
Correct.
So how might you suggest, if there is the possibility in the single use environment, is there opportunity or hope for even accomplishing what you're talking about in terms of creating experiences?
Right. Well, many times in those types of greenfield projects of single use, your road system is long and wide. You have your cul-de-sacs, and while, of course, sometimes it gives us heartburn when we look at that street grid, the ability to turn that into an asset from a safety perspective. Can you start calling cul-de-sacs gray parks? I don't know, but I mean, the idea of saying it creates a sense of safety, and as long as you have the neighbors down there, neighborhood block parties, because oftentimes in these greenfield projects, you don't have a front porch community. They're not designed to be front porch. You have snout houses, you've got curb cuts everywhere. And so how do you take the internal theme of a front porch and bring it out into the streets just to start getting neighbors to communicate with each other and hang out? Now, while your assets from a restaurant or some of the thing may be limited, I got to bet that there's a bunch of grills in that neighborhood. And I got to bet that there's a bunch of men and women who know how to grill in that neighborhood, and that's an asset. Where do these kids go to school, and how do you engage the school to be in this conversation? Thus bringing a sort of very public realm asset to what is predominantly a private property-driven community. That's really, really important and can be a great asset there too. So I think, while it is single use, the people and who they work with and who they go hang out with and what sort of institutions they're connected with can be a great asset in activating certain parts of this neighborhood.
So Daniel, would you say that it's, I guess from what you're describing, the people are the more valuable asset in relation to the built environment in terms of creating the success that you're shooting for? Is that a fair statement?
The people are always more important, no matter where you go. You look at the world around you, and it's amazing what people can do with very little. And so looking to your population, no matter who they are, where they are, what their resources, what their assets, where they come from, they are your primary resource in making a great place. And so the institutions and the things that they use, as I go back to the model of the theater court, they're mere props to the valuation of place, and that is very human driven. So that's how I would answer that. Always lead with people. Always think about how people use space and the assets that they bring to the table. Other questions? Or are you just so mesmerized by me and my hot dog soup?
It's your hot dog soup is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
There was a question about whether you would do a unitard as well, or you just hot dog soup.
Yeah, no. I have a leopard skin unitard and a ribbon, and oftentimes my next presentation will be an interpretive dance of all of my theories, silent interpretive dance. It'll be mesmerizing.
We have a question from one of the folks here at the Salt Lake City Impact Hub. John, do you want to?
Oh, sure. Can you give some examples with using tactical urbanism to set the stage and
sure. Mike, could you repeat that?
The question was if you have any examples where you're using tactical urbanism as a means by which you're generating activity to create experience.
Right. Well, tactical urbanism, really the theater of cool is that uncomfortable cousin of tactical urbanism. It uses tactical urbanism techniques as well. When you're staging things, when you're reclaiming an alley, you're jumping out there as a private individual. That's why I was saying earlier is that while oftentimes we speak about municipalities and the institutions and the businesses getting together, a lot of this stuff can be done on a very micro level. I'll give you a prime example. We had go back to that Placemaker Summit and Small Developer Boot Camp. We roasted a whole pig out in front of our house. Now, you want to talk about shocking people when they're driving down our street. There's a whole, splayed pig over roasted coals in front of someone's home. You don't always see that. It's amazing what that does to shock people into considering, I want to be a part of this neighborhood. The next door neighbor's roasting a pig. I guess I see that as tactical urbanism. The idea of doing something on your own property, small and simple, or getting a group of neighbors to all of a sudden put public sculpture in the front of their lawns. That's all theater of cool. And, certainly I have been enormously informed by the work of Mike Lydon and Tommy Pacello and a lot of those guys and folks all over the country that are doing amazing projects. And so certainly tactical urbanism is a significant tool in the theater of cool.
There's a few more questions that got sent via text. One of them, Daniel, is asking about, and I'll admit I put this one in based on a conversation that you and I had earlier regarding how Walmart, just curious about how Walmart is accepting the idea of needing to attract talent and the relationship that they have to some of the really cool things that have occurred in Bentonville.
Right. Well, Walmart and our general corporate community here in Northwest Arkansas has played a pretty vital and significant role in partnerships with both small businesses and municipalities. Because I go back to that catalytic triad of the private market, the civic world, and the municipal, and how they all have to work together to move this forward. It takes a village to get this stuff done. It isn't one side or the other. And so our corporate partners and our corporate community in Northwest Arkansas has played a vital role in both investments into the sense of place, as have small developers, small business owners, and the municipality. But they also, I think, have a very clear understanding that a good sense of place and things to do and stuff to go to outside of work is really important to attract the best level of talent. And so that plays